Hey Zach,
Hey, how are you, Ed?
good buddy. Happy New Year, man.
Yeah, you too. Hope you had a good New Year and holiday too.
You too, man. I I'm in my last phase of my quarantine for COVID.
Oh, okay. That's good. Last phase, at least.
Yeah. I went on the 31st and got
Yeah.
my I let me see. I have my little test here. When did they
hmm
send it to me? Tuesday? Yeah, I went in on the 31st.
Were you able to get the results quick or?
Fairly quickly. I think I got
Mm.
them on Tuesday. And
Oh,
you know,
okay.
I went on a Friday, so Friday was what, New Year's Eve?
Yeah, so that's a pretty good turnaround actually for what's occurring right now. So,
Yeah, I think I got it like Tuesday morning.
oh, okay. Yeah, very good, very good. Have you been feeling okay and everything? I
Yeah,
assume so. You're here, so
yeah, I go
yeah,
back and forth in terms of being a little stuffy, but
yeah.
sounding more stuffy. People said I
Mm,
sound a little stuffy today, but
mm,
um, but honest to God, given obviously what the worst extreme is, I'm
yeah,
very lucky.
yeah.
Um, so I'm not feeling too bad. Wait a minute.
That's good to hear. Yeah, it's been all over the place.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I got the. I guess I have 10 days. I have to go into the office next
Mm.
week, so I'm thinking by Monday I'm good.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully, yeah. I'm sure it will be okay.
Yeah. What's the just as a quick aside, what's the MO on like getting back uh, vaccinated while you've had COVID or after you've had COVID?
Um, I,
I'm in the middle of my thing, so I don't.
right. I'm not too sure. I think you have to wait a certain amount of time until after you get COVID. I
Someone,
believe so.
someone told me a month if you're gonna like.
Yeah, I believe it's a
I'm in the
month.
middle of doing all mine. So
You're right, yeah. But yeah, definitely I think it's you wait just a bit until you test negative.
hi Sherry, I didn't see it till I went side by side.
Hi. Oh, yeah, I wanted to say Happy New
Russell,
Year.
Happy New Year. I see
So
Russell's
you,
picture.
you weren't vaccinated? What do you mean you have
No,
the booster?
I was, but I'm in the middle of doing all my shots.
Oh, all right. Well,
Not that it matters, I guess now I have the ultimate antibody, right?
Hmm.
yeah, once you have it, right, but you can still get it again.
I don't get it, not get it, up, down, left, right. I just want it all over with. Christmas. Hey, rumba. Masking, unmasking of the remask. I don't know. All right. I'll be right back.
Mhm. Hi, Greg.
Good evening. Hi, how you doing, Zach?
Pretty good. How are you?
Okay. I have a PowerPoint I want to share at some point today during this session. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
I'll let
Zachary,
you
you
know
know
when
how
I'm.
to enable screen sharing whenever
Yeah.
the time comes?
hmm
Okay, great. Just want to make sure.
No. Okay, well, that's fine.
Sorry, guys.
You guys are already recording and streaming, just letting you know that. And Greg, you can't see me actually. Chat Zachary under his name. I will
Got
be
it.
walking away.
Okay,
Just
gotcha,
going forward.
gotcha. Go ahead and walk away. That's fine. We'll figure it out.
As soon as you guys get started, so I can take away this. I'm sharing the agenda here. So.
Like we get an airplane and like you're going, don't worry, I'm going to the back. Don't worry, I'm just using the lavatory for. Door opens.
And I see participants are joining us, so we'll give it a couple more minutes just to start. Ed, I think that's fine, right? We'll shoot for
All good with me.
6:35. We'll give it a couple more minutes for folks to jump on.
Sure. All good. Hi, Peggy. I see you. Rita. Rita, I see you. And Happy New Year. Well, even though I don't see Rita's face.
All right, we'll give it another minute. We'll get started. I see 13 participants in the house. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll give it another minute and see who else joins. And then we'll jump into Housing Committee 2022. All right, Ed, you ready? Why
All
don't we
set, buddy.
want to jump start? So I'm Greg Morris. I'm co-chair of the Housing Committee. Ed, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Ed Hartog, co-chair. Happy New Year to everybody. Welcome to
Happy
the
New Year, everybody.
2022 Housing Committee meeting. Great to see everyone's smiling face. Everybody's back. COVID-free. I would say COVID-free, but I'm recovering, but I'm good. But
Yeah,
it seems to be going around lately.
yeah. To be HIPAA compliant, we won't point any fingers. We'll just say, I think we're all going through it. So we'll all hopefully, I hope you all are well and healthy. I hope your families are happy and healthy. And I think we can all agree it's a new year, and the new year always brings hope, even if there's some stumbling blocks to start. So in any case, I hope we're able to get through together. Tonight, this is a little bit of a different start to our meetings, or a different sort of structure to our meetings than usual. Typically, we would open with a guest speaker or a presentation. We're not going to do that tonight. Instead, we're going to kind of go in a slightly different direction. And actually, I added an element to our agenda that was not initially posted. And that is, I want to spend a little time sharing some of the items that were in the governor's State of the State address related to housing. So we'll start there. Now, right up front, I'm not an expert, in anything that the governor put forward, and I don't think any of us are at this particular time. B, let's remember, State of the State is always kind of like this grand ambition, and then the legislature and others get their hands on it, and then it gets dismantled. But I think tonight it'd be beneficial to start with just sharing some of the items that came up in the State of the State. And I have a PowerPoint that can help us do some of that. We can talk about that. Then I think we should pivot to saying a few words about the last year and some of the things that we tackled and talked about. And then we can end on the note of what Ed and I have discussed in terms of the 4 or 5 sort of things that are really important to us for this new year. And even putting on the table a suggestion about a strategy for digging into some things, which hopefully will incorporate the combined and supportive ambition and time and intelligence and hard work of this group, and what can happen between meetings, so that when we come to meetings, when we're reporting out or reporting back, we can talk about steps that have been taken to address some of what's most important to us, and what has been most important to this community board, which is increasing access, increasing the amount of affordable housing in this district. On that note, I'll pause. Ed, what am I missing? Am I missing anything? Any other ground to
No.
cover before we jump in?
No, I think you hit it all, buddy. I think you hit all of them, and I'm going to let you continue. You seem to be rolling. And no, really, you haven't missed a thing. I've been scribbling down, so I haven't heard you miss a beat.
Thank you, Ed. I appreciate it. Okay, so Zachary, I'm gonna share my screen if that's okay. And
Yeah,
what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna just share and talk out some of the things that I saw and heard from the State of the State. And in particular, this content is drawn from the State of the State book. So it's not specifically from the speech itself. It's from the accompanying document that sort of says, here's all the things that the governor has put forward as important to her. And again, this is the housing element. And we know that there are grand ambitions attached to lots of this stuff. So let me share my screen if I can. Oh, can you allow me that?
Yep. Now you're.
There we go. Okay.
I
Thank
should
you
be
very
able to.
much.
Yeah, of course.
Great. Let's see if I can get in here. There's all my stuff. There we go. Let's try this one. Okay, here we go. That's the new business section.
Nice.
Okay, so let's see if we can go there. Did folks see that? Is that something visible to everybody? If we start.
Oh, good.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Great to see you. Okay, I did that already. Okay, so why don't we do this? I'll talk a little bit and I'll pause, and then we can talk, and then we'll kind of come back and forth. Okay, I don't want to make this just talking at everybody for a few minutes here, but so I've drawn specifically here from the book that accompanies the governor's content. So some of the highlights here in particular to put forward. Governor Hochul putting forth a new $25 billion, billion with a B, initiative. Oops, hold on. I'm sorry. Just move my screen here so I can see everybody. Okay. Putting forth a $25 billion 5-year housing plan to create and preserve 100,000 affordable homes in both urban and rural communities. Again, we're talking about New York State now, not solely New York City, including 10,000 homes with supportive services for vulnerable populations. Once again, just to highlight here, this is talking about the state as a whole. So I'll just kind of continue to walk through this a little bit. Just to reiterate, 100,000, okay. Couple highlights here. If you look at the third bullet, one of the things that the governor put forward in this housing plan was an investment of $300 million in new construction and preservation of senior housing across the state. That's focused on capital improvements in buildings and extending affordability. There's some additional items associated with that particular plan, but there was an initial sort of comment and an investment and a desire to support senior housing, in addition to what I've sort of noted here about low-income rental units as well as supportive housing units. Oops. There we go. The governor went on to talk about some of her particular goals when she thinks about housing, and here's where the lens starts to shift for the governor into what she describes as community-controlled housing. Isolating housing from market forces, something this community has to think about in particular, promoting equality and cohesion among neighbors and enabling residents to exercise shared control housing. This is an interesting sort of piece of the puzzle, especially I think in this district, in terms of how we think about how market forces impact us and sort of the complexity of neighborhoods like ours, where there are different economic sort of forces at play. Here's a note from the governor, pilot programs. Now, specifically, the governor sort of puts forth this idea of saying, look, I'm willing to invest if folks come up to me with solicit.
Can't hear you, buddy. We lost you.
Hold on.
There you go. Now you're
Okay.
back.
Can you hear me at all?
Now you're back.
Okay, sorry about that. So primary goals, community controlled housing. One of the elements that the governor highlights is a pilot program. She's sort of saying, we're going to put some money out there and we're going to want to see folks come up with good ideas. And of that, if you noticed here in this second bullet, pilot programs will solicit projects through a competitive request for proposal process and will allow for a variety of ownership models, including, but not limited to, and I'm sort of tagging this because we've talked about this before, there's the magic words, the Mitchell-Lama model, including, but not limited to, the Mitchell-Lama model, shared equity housing, as well as community land trusts. The key here, the last bullet, the governor saying at this point, again, in her state of the state, that all applications for these particular programs and projects will need to be permanently affordable. Once again, an ambitious and desirable exercise and effort, one put forward on the table, something that we've talked about through the course of this committee over the last year. I also want to note for you that she spoke about accessory, or that she wrote about, her team wrote about accessory dwelling units. We actually had I don't know if you recall this, but a while back we did some presentations about this. This is a particularly hot topic in the city because after the last significant storm that we had, folks ended up dying because of these dwelling units, these accessory dwelling units that are below ground. So I just want to highlight that the governor is put forwarding some options to increase accessibility to these particular options, to permit what is being described here as permit these vital options and help reduce housing costs. Governor Hochul will propose legislation to require municipalities to allow a minimum of 1 ADU on owner-occupied residentially zoned lots. Now, again, we know this affects the state very differently than it affects the city, but just wanted to mention this because we had talked previously about the options related to accessory dwelling units in the city. Here's another interesting sort of piece of the puzzle. Governor Hochul putting forward some thoughts about floor area ratio, the magic FAR. This is directly from the text. Existing New York state law limits the maximum density of residential FAR in New York City to 12.0, even though it does not limit the overall allowable floor area that may compromise other uses. Governor Hochul proposes a repeal of this antiquated limitation on the city's authority and give the city the autonomy it should have to allow for denser residential development where appropriate. Now, we can pause here and discuss and debate on that particular point, or at least get some reflections or questions. I'm happy to do so, but there's a couple other slides to go, but I'm happy to continue on. Ed, do you want me to continue on, or should we pause?
You know, let's start, see if anybody has any comments, but I mean, it's good so far. I mean, do you have, how much
Yeah.
further do you have? Couple pages or?
Yeah, a couple more slides to go. I'll go through the rest of them, and then we can take some time.
No, I mean, if anybody has any, if anybody has a question, put your hand up. If not, we can just go to the end. Nothing, any hands up?
Yeah, just want to make sure. I hate to talk at folks for too long. All right.
Okay, all good, it seems.
All right, we'll keep going. Just put my screen back here so I can see you. Okay, so a couple other items from the governor's state of the state. Proposing legislation to facilitate conversions in the following manner: hotel conversions and office conversions. Again, this has been a topic that has come up in the city quite a bit in response to the pandemic. Interesting to note that the governor is thinking about proposing legislation to focus on these particular items. I'm not going to get into the weeds of it or the details of it at this point, but this is something I think the city has been talking about and thinking about, and during the course of our committee time, we've talked about this as well. Here's another one that has come up in this conversation from time to time. 421A set to expire in 2022. Governor Hochul is going to propose a new tax abatement that aims to achieve the following goals: deeper affordability, longer term affordability, especially for low-income households, ensure long-term availability of affordable rental units in neighborhoods across the city, and restructuring the tax abatement to ensure maximum efficiency of taxpayer dollars. What does that mean? What does any of that mean? That's going to require a lot of work, and it's going to be very intense to think through how all of that's going to play out. But I just want to flag 421A is on the governor's mind, and it is set to expire. Two other pieces of legislation designed to protect New Yorkers at risk of discrimination. A credit to New York, legislation that will prohibit residential landlords from automatically denying applicants on the basis of credit history. And then there's also the fair chance housing. This is her legislation that will eliminate private landlords' ability to automatically reject individuals with specific vulnerabilities. There we go. Final note on this, and again, the state of the state and this content is lots of parts. I'm just drawing out some of the things that have come up in our conversations here, but here's the key. The executive budget, the governor puts forward an executive budget, then there's a budget analysis, and there's a final budget on April 1, and we can agree budgets are a statement of values. So if the governor wants to put forward this particular agenda, the dollars have to back it up to make it possible. The legislature is going to have to support it, and that's the only way we see. And just to note, I think we can all agree, just based on the data that we've heard thus far, the state has the coffers right now to make a big difference in the lives of a lot of folks. Depends on what it's going to do with it. But I want to kind of start with some of these housing items because they're all things that we have talked about in this committee before. And one of the things that we're going to propose, Ed and I will propose towards the end of this conversation, is some working group efforts to think about how it is that we engage with our city and state electeds. Because when there are ambitions or ideas that make sense to us, how can we and other community boards step up to assert our support and our engagement to make them possible is the open question. Zachary, why don't you take me off screen share now, and maybe we can just get some thoughts and reactions, and then I'll go back to the screen share in a little bit. Rita, floor is yours.
First question, how much say does the state have over the city as far as housing goes? I mean, she could write whatever she wants, but if the city doesn't have to follow it, you and I both know what's going to happen. So that's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, we should bring back CSS with Michelama too, and really look into it wholeheartedly. And could somebody tell me what a Class B hotel is versus, I certainly know what a Class A is.
I don't have those details. I'm sure we could find a guest that could come in and fill in the blanks. If anybody knows on here, feel free to jump in. Forgive me. I don't know my A's from my B's.
And last, having nothing to do with what, incidentally, Greg, I thought that presentation was wonderful. I think you covered a lot of things. As I said, it would be nice if the city had to listen to what the state said. And upstate, there isn't a lot of multifamily housing, and that's what we've always battled. But one thing, I think it was Lowell, who is a member of our community board, and he's a union person. And he and I were talking one day, and I said, well, how does the Esplanade on the west side get all this stuff that they have? It looks great. And he said, because he said the developers have to put into the Esplanade. We don't have that on the east side. There is construction on every block. Okay, that's an exaggeration. There is a construction on every other block. And I mean high-rise construction. How do we get developers to have to put in for the Esplanade? Because right now on the Esplanade, we do an inch at a time. And nobody, I mean, for sure me, but nobody, including our high school kids on the board, will ever live long enough to ever use the Esplanade at an inch at a time. So I don't know what agency does that, who gives developers a right to build and say, by the way, X% has to go to the Esplanade. I'm done.
No, Rita, that's a great point. Maybe, and I think we all in this meeting know that a lot of that happens with the benefit and the support of your local city council members. And I think that's a great question for our new council member, Julie Menon. And I see from the news accounts, looks as if our other city council member, Keith Powers, while he is not speaker of the city council, it appears that he is now the majority leader, if I'm not mistaken, for the city council. That's not a bad, you could do a lot worse than that. Maybe there's something there between the two of them. Maybe that's something we could, Greg and I could follow up on. Maybe we could have, I don't think anybody from their office is on with us. I don't think so, but maybe they could come and there's a way, I don't know, something. I don't know. That's a thought, maybe.
Yeah, it's definitely a good thought and one to reflect on as we go forward. I mean, I think to the main point, Rita, or the starting point, Rita, I'll just say, what control does the state, or what power does the state have over the city, is an interesting conversation. I think specific to the budget, it's ultimately the state that approves the city's budget. So I'll just say here, I think what we're talking about in relation to when the state has ideas and how the city enacts them, I think what our elected officials can do as they think about creating legislation, whether they're state officials or city officials. I think in both those cases, I'd like for this housing committee to be a committee that can bring those folks to the table and to share their thinking and their objectives and their desires, and for us to push them and challenge them to meet what we think are the right needs of the community we serve. And then to figure out how it is that during the course of this year, 2022 and beyond, we figure out how to actually see some things that matter to us happen. So again, all this to say, I think you're asking really good questions. And I think we need to get some folks who are much more capable than I am to come in and talk to us and help us think some of this through, specific to some of the questions. that you had, or some of the thoughts that you had in your initial reaction. Hope
Thank
that
you.
makes sense.
Thank you.
Sure. Margaret Price, I see you up next. Go right ahead.
Hi, thanks very much for your report, Gregory. I just want to say my thoughts about your presentation is I still grapple with this idea of quote unquote, what is affordable? What constitutes affordable housing? We've had people come to our committee, and I've said so myself, saying that we don't just need low income housing, we need moderate income housing. And so I don't know if that falls under the rubric of affordable, but we do need some sort of operational definition of what we think is affordable and what we need. And secondly, to respond to what you were saying, okay, so excuse me, the governor is talking about forking out a lot of money for what she calls affordable housing. I think it's incumbent on us to come up as soon as possible with some estimate of the need that we can take to her or other elected officials and whatever and say, okay, there's the pot of money and here's what we need of that share of that money. And I really think we should come up with some sort of estimates of what we specifically want. And it seems to me the sooner the better, and begin to lobby for what we want and need. So those are my 2 points. I think we ought to get on the stick, so to speak, about what share of the pie we want. But I want to understand what is affordable housing, what numbers fall under the rubric of affordable housing. So thank you.
It's a question we've grappled with for as long as I've been on this committee. I'm sure it's existed before, and it's one we'll need to continue to talk and think about. It's a topic that we broached, and we need to get more information on what does affordability actually mean. And also, to your earlier point, I think this committee needs to, and again, we'll share this a little later in terms of working groups, the analysis that needs to be done in terms of what's available and what our interests are and where we think the money should be is also an important point to us. Go ahead, Ed.
No, I was going to say, Peggy, that's such a great question, but I was going to say to the tail end of our discussion tonight, that's something, Greg, you and I talked about the other day on the phone. I have something to add. You know, you and I were talking about the four things.
Oh, yeah.
I have something, I think, in terms of that, but I'll table that for later on.
Great. When we get into the working group section, we'll tag that on. Billy, I see you're up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I just want to thank Ed and Greg for, leading with this in this meeting. I think it's really helpful for us to get our arms around, and the presentation was excellent. One thing I wanted to highlight that stood out to me in the, it wasn't actually in the speech, but I think it was in the book, the policy book that you referenced, Greg, is a commitment to a pilot program of transitional housing for justice-involved individuals.
Yes.
And the idea being that people leaving incarceration, we know often need support to make a successful transition. There are risks of recidivism, of being accused of committing a crime again, right, that exist anytime anyone leaves the justice system. But I think we all are interested in what are the ways in which to support people to ensure the best possible success when someone leaves a jail, like we have at Rikers Island, for example, or a state prison, or perhaps they've received clemency or they're on parole and so forth. And so the devil's in the details. I think maybe a mere 3 paragraphs of that book were devoted to this pilot program, and it wasn't incredibly specific. But I want to highlight that as something that I think was really great to hear from the governor, and I think we should try to learn more about. That was the positive, and a lot of what you mentioned I found also to be very positive. A couple negatives just to highlight. I believe that the policy book and the speech did not mention anything about the eviction moratorium. I think there's some reporting that perhaps the eviction moratorium may not be extended further. I just want to put that on our radar because I know there may be differing views on on that in this committee. And then something we've often talked about, and I don't know whether Sandrea is here, but Nycha funding. The New York Housing Conference has called for $1.5 billion of funding to Nycha over 5 years annually, 1.5 billion every year. And I don't believe the speech or the policy book mentioned Nycha at all, which was very disconcerting. I don't know if this is well. We're hoping that Build Back Better passes and we'll see public housing funding, but that's something that we should be keeping our eyes on and holding the governor's feet and the legislature's feet to the fire about, making sure that that type of funding is contemplated as the Senate and Assembly reconvene this month. So those are just some of my thoughts, and I thought it was a really great presentation, Greg. Thank you.
Yeah, Billy, thank you. You did a great job of sort of beginning the stage of carpet bombing all the things about the presentation that have been highlighted as gaps and holes and pieces of the puzzle that there have been reactions about in terms of this policy book, what's missing, and things that are absolutely critical to, I think, our conversation and conversations in this city and state about how we take care of people, how people are served by housing initiatives. So thank you for highlighting those, and to your note, your initial one about sort of the specialized housing components, just didn't have the space in I think the presentation to plug it in. Should have been there. Absolutely critical, and something that I think we can continue to dig in on. So Billy, thank you very much for that. Sharon, why don't you jump in? I see your hand up.
Okay. Well, the reason I got on the call today was because of the governor's proposals on housing. And I thank Greg for doing a great job. In fact, I'm looking at the article in Times today. Great job on doing that. As we know, this is kind of a wish list that still has to go through the legislature. So I think it would behoove us to identify items that are of particular importance to the city and the community board and focus on them. I mean, I remember having conversations about the converting of hotels and office buildings. We've kind of, it seems to me, my recollection is that we weren't happy with that idea. So I think the committee should make a list of priorities. Let's really flush them out, and then we can lobby our own elected officials, our assembly members, and they need to know what we think would be good for our community. And I think that would be very, very worthwhile, educate ourselves and then be able to educate our other, our assembly members and senators, and let them know which of her ideas we like and which we don't like. So thank you for getting on top of this, Greg. I think that was great. But I think, and again, very often we take on too much. So I'm thinking we should really kind of pinpoint the most important items and focus on that, because if it's too diffuse, you don't get anything. So at least, if we can kind of highlight what is most important to our community and then go from there, I think that would really be very, very important.
I think that's a spot on sort of way to think about this, that priorities matter here, and then working through the pros and cons and thinking it through, and then organizing and then thinking about the action steps is exactly what I think Ed and I have talked about in terms of what we believe.
That's, we have to be smart about it. So great.
And on that note, I also want to say to this body, and it's a follow-up to our last meeting last year, is to say that I think the reality is, and specific to all these items, this is a wish list, and Sharon correctly pointed out that what the governor put forward is a wish list. The reality is, and we've been through this sometimes as a committee, when things come on the table as it relates to housing, affordable housing options, and there's complexities here. There's budgetary stuff, there's environmental stuff, there is socioeconomic stuff, there's racial dynamics, there's historical dynamics, there's a lot within these. And I think I just want to emphasize to this body how appreciative I am, because our conversations, I think they can be robust and they can be respectful, and we may not always get to the ideal answer, but I do feel like we've got to position ourselves to be going in the right direction, because otherwise, if you're not putting a stake in the ground to say what you want, you're not going to get anything. And I think I would continue to challenge us and in this new year to be open and to think about the pros and the cons and have to make some hard decisions sometimes about what we think is right and how we get there. So just want to kind of note that for everybody as we enter the new year. Andrew, why don't you go ahead, Andrew? I see your hand up.
I would just like to echo everyone else and say Happy New Year and also great presentation. I also was encouraged by many aspects of Governor Hochul's address yesterday. Billy, I think she briefly mentioned NYCHA at the beginning and finally funding NYCHA. I think that's one critical important step. The other step is making sure that the money that's allocated actually gets there and is spent properly, because in city accounting, 2 + 2 somehow never adds up to 4. 4 somehow disappears down into 3. And so I'm really happy to hear about that financial commitment. And I hope that systems are put in place so that there is accountability with the money, and so that NYCHA residents finally get the lead-free, poisonless housing that they deserve. I was also really encouraged that Governor Hochul talked about not only the creation of 100,000 units, but the preservation of units as well. You guys have heard me speak many times about the fact that we lose a lot of housing. This area has lost around 14,000 units since 2007 in housing that's affordable, because these developers that are going to build tall and quote unquote affordable knock down the smaller buildings that actually have housing that people can afford, never build back at that same price. And so we've gained units, but we've lost housing that's affordable. So I'm really interested to see what kind of proposals we can come up with. I've spoken many times about the environmental issues of building too tall, where above 210 feet, there's an exponential increase in greenhouse gas emissions and pollution and the urban heat island effect, which may not have a monetary cost up front, but it does down the line. And I know that sometimes when I speak in these abstract ways, I can sound like a quack, but even a UN report recently says that building dense and building medium height is the way to go. And they compared Paris and us. Paris has a similar population density, but they build lower, and therefore their greenhouse gas emissions are much, much lower than ours. Luckily, there's still a lot of building to do with moderately sized housing. But the way I'll close it out is, I forgot who it was. I think it was Margaret Price who talked about developing our own initiatives. I don't know if this housing committee necessarily covers Midtown East, where a lot of the conversion of office buildings could take place. But if that's within our group, or if we could collaborate with another community group, why not try to create our own piece of model legislation? We could call it the New York City Affordable Housing Conversion and Decarbonization Act, because decarbonization of currently existing structures is also really important. And there's a great nonprofit called The Clean Fight that was featured on New York One. Yes, I know they're Spectrum News. I'm always going to call it New York One. And they talked about making buildings, decarbonizing buildings and the good work that could be done there. And also we could have a diversity, equity, and inclusion aspect where workers that have particularly been excluded from such kind of work can get these jobs, unions can get these jobs, and then people can reside in these buildings that also typically have been excluded. So there's a lot of good work to be done ahead, and I'm looking forward to doing it and being a part.
Thank you for that, Andrew. And I knew you'd get to the decarbonization piece. Thank you for doing that. I didn't sort of flag or note some of that in here, but there are critical elements that I think this body can continue to think about and talk about specific to housing in that regard. So thank you for plugging that along with the other items that you shared. Rita, I see your hand up again. You want to jump back in? Go ahead.
I have a new mouse and it's a right left, and I never had a right left, and we're not talking to each other, so bear with me. Everyone's comments are so incredible tonight, as they always are. But coming back to what Peggy Price talked about, which is, as all of you know, my sore spot is about AMI. And I really never remember numbers because they belong to other people and they should remember them, except that I remember the numbers in Building 8 on Roosevelt Island. In Building 8 on Roosevelt Island, where the developer received a tax incentive for building, including affordable housing. And the affordable housing started, I think, maybe 2 units at 125%, but most of the units that were affordable were 185%. Now, the AMI is set by the federal government, but that means area median income. And we all know that Roosevelt Island abuts, what is that, Long Island City. Not exactly the Rodeo Drive of this. So therefore, area median income, none of those people on the other side of the bridge in Queens could ever afford to cross over the bridge and live on Roosevelt Island. Originally, Roosevelt Island was to be 100% affordable. Where it went off the track, I don't really know. But we have to bring it back. I don't understand if it's more than 100% of the area median income. I don't get it. I don't get 185%, because to me 100% is top, that's where it is. But so it's a slippery slope that developers like to ride, and that we have not been on, and we have not questioned and stamped our feet and screamed. I think it's something that we should look into about area median income. And I think that community services can help us with that. But if not, let's go to Washington and talk. We have a president now who really believes in affordable housing. Maybe we can get some guidelines. That's what I wanted to say. And the census. What about using the census to find out what our area is attractive incentive? Why shouldn't people in Nycha be able to move out of Nycha?
Again, I think this goes back to something that I think Ed and I and this committee need to work on, which is, I think it would be really beneficial for us to work with folks we know and the agencies, some of whom have come to speak to this group, to be able to put an FAQ kind of sheet together for us that perhaps we just always have in the chat box, which reminds us, related to AMI, which reminds us related to kind of the analysis of the district. And in places where there's information we don't have, we need to get it. We need to figure out who can help us get it. But I think it's something what you're saying, Rita, reminds me that that's something we just need to have access to, so we have a sense of what's happening in our district and what we're fighting for and what we're up against.
The last presentation, people who came, they touched on it, but never went deep enough. They just were saying how we need to do it, and if we do this, it will take several years to do that. We don't have the years.
Right.
We really don't. So, I mean, I think if we go for three things, 3 major topics, is definitely what is affordable, and how does a developer ascertain what's affordable versus what is needed by the community.
I wonder if Ed, if there's anything you want to say specific to that, because I feel like that's something you've been thinking about and mentioning in this space when we've talked about developers and what we need to understand from them. Anything you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, no, I wish I had something insightful to add to that. Like Rita, it's just been a very, it's been hard getting, just any kind of information about that. I would like to save some of this discussion for the end, because I think this is something that maybe we could make this part of some of like our working groups that we've been thinking about. That's kind of what I've been thinking as you've been speaking, Rita, is that, I think, if I may, just for a brief second, skip ahead, one of the things I've been pondering here is, and Greg's line about the FAQ, is that, again, the existential question we always ask, what is affordable, this AMI issue, and that maybe folks can be thinking about is, I really would like to add to our list here, if people would like to own this, as Greg and I were chatting before the meeting, for this month's meeting, is some folks saying like, we'll own this, like we'd like to work on this issue. Like, I would love it if there were one or two folks who would like to just drill down for us and just maybe come back to the committee and say, look, we got together, we looked at, this AMI issue. This is something we'd like to propose. Like, this is something that we could go to. Like, maybe there's a couple of folks who could work on this. Like, what do we define? Like, forget, we keep asking these other people, what do they define? The heck with them. How about we start setting the discourse a little bit, and we say, we've looked at this, and maybe a couple of folks get together and say, we got together, we looked at some of the information on this, whatever's out there, there's so much out there, and we proposed this idea, and maybe this is something we could adopt. Maybe this is actually an action item we could adopt. We could say, this is what we're proposing, fitting Manhattan going forward with the new mayor. Again, I think we have great opportunity, frankly, with Julie Menon. Not that Keith, and Bendon, not that Bendon wasn't trying to help, but, with a fresh start with Julie, with Keith, he's in an elevated position now. Maybe there's something we could get going with that. I mean, that's sort of my 2 cents on the piece. But, in terms of this existential question and kind of moving the needle a little bit, moving this ball forward in some way. I don't know if that helps or if that's far afield.
No,
That's good.
I don't know if I'm still unmuted. Am I?
No,
We can hear you. We can hear you.
hear you.
Okay. The thing is that with mentioning Mitchell Lama 2, that goes hand in hand with AMI, so that there's a lot out there, but again, we have to figure out, as Greg and you have said, that what reign does the city have over? What reign does the state have over the city?
Right.
But we could find out. We could find out, because right now it looks like the developers do all the figuring out.
Mm-hmm. That's right. They seem to.
Why don't we, Billy, why don't you jump in, and then we'll pivot to, I think, the old business, new business section, which is, I think, taking a lot of what we talked about here and trying to figure out those working groups that Ed has referenced. Go ahead, Billy.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I don't know if this is a premature comment, but I meant to mention earlier, as far as a priority for us, and I don't know that it weaves in with the state of the state too much, but just thinking about these manufacturing and industrial zoned areas in our neighborhood, and if housing remains an important goal for us as a community board, how we're going to transform those sites from storage facilities and car rental facilities into actual permanently affordable housing and the like. So I think that's just important for us to think about, as a priority. And I apologize because I've had to go in and out of a couple of things, so I haven't fully followed the entire meeting. But so I don't know if it's out of turn, but I just think that should be a priority. And if we have a working group or a subcommittee on that type of thing, I'd love to be a part of it.
Thank you for saying that, and I'll just note that I think zoning appears in one of our suggested working groups, and I think it was largely based on some of what has been brought to the table in this committee that you have mentioned, specifically related to those zoning pieces that you referenced.
And just do we have a sense of how it's going to work for us to take that on with also the zoning committee? Is that something where we work in parallel?
Yeah, it's a great question, and again, I think we can talk a little bit about this when we get into the working group, but I'll just flag this to say, a lot of the work that we're interested in doing and working as a committee to think about intersects with other committees, not probably zoning would be the highest on the list in terms of like overlap and connectivity. We need to talk about that. And I think part of what we thought about in the working group strategy was members of the housing, sort of a housing group, working group connecting, a housing committee working group connecting with a zoning kind of working group. And for us to really think about how our agendas and some of our topics intersect, what we can learn from each other, what is it that they can run with and we can run with at the same time. Again, there's a lot of layers there, but I think to your point, this has not been hammered out by any stretch with zoning. It's simply at this point saying, we can sit at every meeting and say the same things about what we imagine or what we know or what we wish we knew, or we could try to use the time in between to try to get some things done. So I think that's the objective. I see Marco's hands up, though. I want to make sure Marco gets to weigh in. Go ahead, Marco.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to clarify something that I hear constantly in this meeting. They said the higher the building, the exponential is the use of the increase of the carbon monoxide or something like that. The person that keeps saying that, I strongly recommend they should read the building code. That's what it is. Nothing. The higher the building is, nothing is going to affect in that direction. A good example is the building that was on Cornell University, right there on Roosevelt Island. This is a net zero building, meaning that do not consume nothing, the energy, nothing. And it's one of the best buildings that was done in New York State. So the person that keeps saying that building, the higher the building, the more exponential increase of the carbon use, this is wrong. So if you read this person, the building code calls for exactly, is calling for reduction of the CO, and the reduction of the CO. Yes, the problem is there is lack of enforcement. There is this kind of situation that do not enforce New York City, especially the building department. Read the building code, and then you can talk about that.
So let me just jump in here and say, I really want this to be a forum where we can talk to each other in just, generous ways. And if we disagree, we can respectfully disagree with each other. And I'm just flagging it because in past meetings, there have been circumstances where it's felt to me as if different points of view have resulted in maybe language or tone that maybe wasn't as open or respectful. So Marco, I think your point is understood and appreciated. And the desire to understand code is definitely a key part of this. I just want to kind of rewind for a second to talk about the intention of this conversation is to lead us to some working groups. And I think those working groups can focus on a lot of really critical issues for us. And when we work together in working groups and we try to work towards solutions or recommendations or legislation options, it's really going to be important that we listen to each other and we come up with solutions together in terms of what our recommendations or proposals are. Andrew, I'm going to give you the final word here. And again, I'm just going to ask that we are sensitive to each other's points of view and that we just manage our tone as best we can when we may disagree with each other's points of view. Go ahead, Andrew. I'll let you button it up, and then we'll move on to the old business, new business section.
Oh, I feel so honored that you're letting me button it up. And I just also want to say that I think Marco is a genius and he's so knowledgeable. And I always love hearing different points of view. And I would definitely love to learn more about zoning codes. There is the quantitative research data, though, that does suggest that building height does have a factor both in energy usage and in the urban heat island effect. The urban heat island effect is the interaction between tall buildings that traps heat and makes it hotter on the ground, anywhere from like 4 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And while it may just sound like an inconvenience, it actually has a profound effect on our health, on our cellular health. I'm a peer-reviewed published researcher, a cellular researcher. It has effects on our respiratory health, and it has effects on our cardiovascular health as well. There are definitely ways, I'm sure, and Marco, I cannot wait to learn from you and other people in this committee to mitigate some of those net zero effects. I think it's also important to monitor quote unquote LEED certified or green buildings, because there was an example in Midtown, the Bank of America building was this new environmentally friendly building, super tall but super sleek and supposedly good for the planet. And it ended up being one of the worst energy consuming buildings in the entire city due to the machinery that was in there. So There's, as you said at the beginning, a multitude of factors to consider. I am always learning. I'm always also reading peer-reviewed studies, and I can't wait to work together because there is so much common ground and there's so many good solutions to be made.
Thank you, Andrew. I think that is a good way for us to pivot to the old business, new business section. Zachary, if you'd be willing, I'd love to pull up I'd like to share my
Sure.
screen again, if possible. And
Okay,
I'll
you
I'll
should
talk
be
through
able
a couple of
to.
items as we go through the old, and Mark, we're going to ask you to hold on so we can go through old business and new business.
Okay,
So go ahead.
you should be
Zachary,
able to share now.
Yeah, okay, thank you. See if we can get this up here. Here it is, okay. Yeah, it's all right, okay. Can you see that? Is that there? Does the folks see the screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to do two things here. One is I just want to sort of focus on some of the issues that we're not going to go into detail here, but I just wanted to highlight for you in 2021 some of the items that we talked about. And again, in terms of solutions or clarity, or as this meeting in and of itself has sort of said, we haven't solved anything yet, or we haven't come to conclusion yet. But I just wanted to note for you in 2021, we had a number of guest speakers that joined us that talked about affordability. We flagged middle income housing as not yet affordable, what affordability means on a lot of levels. We talked about how that supports and intersects with middle income housing. We talked about density. We talked about zoning. AMI continues to be something that we reflect on and think about. The developer mindset came up a number of times because, as we know, there are lots of developers who make a lot of agreements, do lots of things, and then we never see it happen. Mitchell-Lama 2 has come up a number of times. A great solution, a thing that meant a lot that has not been able to come back to light. Perhaps in the governor's state of the state, there'll be some motivation to continue moving that forward. And then we've also talked about sort of pending bills and legislation that popped up over the course of the year. And then, of course, because we were riding the waves of COVID, we didn't get to dig in anything because we were just responding to crisis, I think, as a city and as a state. So it got very hard to dig into these issues in more direct ways with our electeds and others. So the other note I want to make here is, if you just look at the slide, you look at the right-hand side, it's called parking lot there. So this is another thing that these are items that came up for us that we really didn't get to dig into. So we didn't have presenters that really sort of touched on these topics that this committee sort of said, this is important. They came up a lot. We should be thinking about it and talking about it. So for instance, empty lots and warehousing came up a number of times. It was specifically about the idea of there are these vacant spaces within the district. What's going on with those things? They're getting overgrown. They're not being addressed. They're not being touched. What happens? Another item that came up again was related to developers and how do we hold them accountable? How do they get held accountable for how it is that decisions get made or not? We talked a little bit about middle income, but again, some of the conversation that was important for us that we didn't quite get into last time, although we did get some data on this, is who our constituents are, real analysis of CB8 in terms of income levels to really try to wrap our heads around them, because I think we know some things and we need to know a little bit more. And it also came to light that there was some conversation about, well, if housing was going to be built, who would we rely on to do it? Who should be stepping up? And at a couple of our meetings, the nonprofit developers or the developers that have a record of doing better was something that I think we were interested in. So I just want to kind of note these things because these are things that came up for us that we talked about. We had guests that talked about some of these things. And then was also the list of items that we just didn't get to. And we'll have to decide over time whether or not we want to dig into those. And now pivoting to what Ed and I have sort of been talking about, Ed and I have been thinking about how it is that we use the time between meetings to be active. And because there are so many different layers to housing and housing related issues, we're really interested in this idea of creating some working groups. So based on a conversation that Ed and I had, we came up with some ideas for working groups, meaning like groups that would get together between meetings to engage with, experts, to be able to talk to each other and experts, to be able to work towards coming up with ideas, recommendations, or additional questions or thoughts that might sort of lead us down the path of this committee agreeing on things that we could then bring to the board to agree on things that hopefully would lead to action. And so these are the committees, these are the working groups that we sort of talked about and thought about. Now, we're not wedded to any of this at this point. I think we're putting it, and is it fair to say, we're putting these on the table as things that we think would be beneficial to have working groups that are focused on. And at this point, I don't want to get into who's the leader yet. We just want to sort of put it on the table to say,
Right.
here are some working groups we think would be beneficial to have, that would then report out at our meetings or engage between meetings to connect with us during meetings. But we can certainly think about more. We can add, subtract. We can do a lot of different things here. So I'll just announce the top 6, and Ed, you may have some clarifying notes on this or add some things. But
Sure.
How do a working group specifically focused on the residents of public housing in CB8? So specifically, we have heard over and over how the city does not do the work it needs to do to take care of our residents of public housing. We think a working group that would specifically be focused on supporting our residents of public housing would be beneficial. We could expand this, we could move this around, but we think that's something where this community board needs to step up and say that it stands with our neighbors, especially those who live in public housing, to make sure that they're getting access to the resources and services that they need. As has been presented a number of times, that's not happening now. Another working group could be focused solely on, or not solely, but could be focused on zoning. And that is a working group from my perspective that would be partnering with the existing zoning committee to think about what zoning needs to look like that would make more sense for our district and what it can mean moving forward. That would be the second. The third, and this might be for us, it might be for others, but we really need to get, and we've talked about this, we really need to have a group that's really focused on this district and really is capable of thinking about what's happening within the district in terms of development. Another piece of this, number 4 on the working group list, the desire to have a working group that could connect and partner specifically with committees for other community boards in other districts. The reality is we are going to be much more powerful if it's not just our own legislative ideas or our own sort of asks and ambitions, but if those are connected to other community boards who have similar needs, interests, and concerns, that does raise the stakes. The next thing I'll talk about is a working group to think about developers and how it is that we work with developers, how it is we can learn to interact with developers so that when they make commitments, they actually meet them. And of course, the last working group might be specifically a unit that really does dig in and partner with our elected officials and other representatives to think about how it is that the affordable options and the specialized housing opportunities that are available in CB8. Ed, what am I missing? What can I add on?
Yeah, and I see you had some hands up, Russell. I see your hand up, and I know Marco had his hand up. I'll throw into this, and then we'll kick it out for further discussion. Some of the ideas I had, and maybe they can fit under some of these categories or whatever we want to do. I really would like to see if there's some folks who could take some time, who have some time to come up with what we define as, this affordable housing, this AMI, maybe something, maybe it's no more than a couple of paragraphs or something we could put on the web under our committee. When you go to the CB8 website, it has a housing committee, they have some basic issues or ideas, something on affordable housing, how we define it, how the AMI works in there. The other thing was, if folks want to put together that list that I think Sherry was talking about, things within the governor's speech on that might be applicable to our particular community district. The other idea, which I've heard kicked around and again fits under maybe some of these rubrics, is this idea. It came up during our meeting in September. Remember when they came with the high-end storage facility up there by the Spence, was it the Spence School right there on 90th? People are talking about because it's M1 or whatever it is. I know Adam Wald and others have talked about maybe instead of having M1 there, if you move that to a C19 or C28, or, Marco, I know you and Rita and others are on the zoning committee. Again, that could fit maybe under the thing that you're talking about, Greg, in terms of working with zoning. And the 421A proposal, maybe again, that fits under one of those other rubrics, but maybe we could find a way or reach out to somebody in the governor's office. But if she's really serious about rejiggering the 421A program, I think it would be to our benefit as CB8, because I think we're at the forefront of that, right? I mean, let's be honest. We have some of the most expensive real estate, biggest bang for the buck, return on investment. 421A seems to really impact our neighborhood, I think, a lot without looking at the numbers, but those are just some thoughts. And then I'll just be quiet and kick it open to, I'm looking here at my notes. Sorry about that. I'm like Columbo here with the pad. But I think that covered everything.
Just so you know, I put the working group recommendations, that initial list, I put it in the chat so you can see it. Ed is adding some layers to that, building on some of the existing and adding some new ones. I'm not going to sort of type that in now. Well, that'll be part of the minutes, but I just want to make sure people have reference to it, these sort of working groups. But I see some hands up. So Russell, I see your hand up. You want to jump in, Russell?
Yeah.
Thank you. So one other issue that I wanted to suggest is sustainability and resilience. So if you recall, this is there was a meeting of the Environment and Sanitation Committee a few months ago in the wake of Ida that talked about resilience and things that need to happen. One of the big areas has to do with buildings and how things are built and that whole category. And so Barbara Rudder's not on this meeting, but she's the co-chair of the now the Environment Committee. So I know it's a big issue she's been trying to work with other committees on. And so I think basically, you know, the sort of building type stuff, you know, I think probably sort of falls within the remit of this committee as much as any. And so to the extent that sort of that aspect of resilience is something that you guys are willing to take on and work with the Environment Committee on, I think that's another great thing to look at.
It's a great idea. Very nice, good suggestion.
Thank you for that.
Sorry.
I see a thumbs up on that one too. I see a couple thumbs up in response to that. That's nice. Billy, I see your hand up. You want to jump in?
Yeah, I think these are all really great ideas. One thing, and maybe it fits in with the part about completing an analysis of lots to encourage development, is it was recently reported that Julie Menon is asked the city, or maybe, I can't remember which agency, but she's asked to identify city-owned lots in our district. And I think for her, it's with an eye toward community gardens in the district. But I think to the extent we can piggyback off of that effort to identify lots that could potentially be developed, whether as 100% permanently affordable housing or mixed market and affordable housing, we should look into that. And then I don't know whether this is part of what you're contemplating with, I'm just looking at the list here. I think maybe it fits in with one of your points on the list for working groups, Greg, but the idea of focusing on how we can support safe havens, permanent supportive housing and the like in our district, whether it's identifying those lots where that could be possible or through other mechanisms. I think that should be a real focus of ours. I would also add to that, not just for future types of that housing, but how can we continue to support, for example, the 91st Street Safe Haven? And on this, I guess I would wonder, do we risk stepping on the toes of the HSSS committee, which I think held the hearing on the Safe Haven or not? But in my view, this committee should have a role in looking at safe havens, looking at permanent supportive housing, and perhaps HSSS is more focused on the programmatic issues around social services, but we can be focused on where does this type of housing actually get built?
That's right. Where does it go? Where can you say this is a location you'd be thinking about? Yep, that's well said. I appreciate you adding that on. And yeah, that could be connected to zoning. That could be related to completing the analysis of the district. It bleeds through a lot of those pieces. So thank you for flagging that, Billy. Well said. And again, specifically these working groups, there would be a lot of subset questions to answer. There's a lot of focus points, but again, we just threw them on there to kind of gauge a reaction to it. Any other thoughts and reactions to the working group recommendations, ideas, new, old, or in between? What you're adding on now is really exceptional. Thank you all. Marco, go ahead.
Thank you. I think we are, in the wrong approach. First of all, I think the chair is right here in the meeting. We have to differentiate. The community board is a debate in democracy, a debate of ideas, a debate of face each other respectfully, not at the time the chair, with all respect, The chair are basically are the facilitators of that. They are not the boss. They are not the supervisor. They cannot cut when that person is speaking in the floor while they address the issues respectfully. And that is nothing wrong to be in disagreement with somebody else. And if you have some knowledge, you can present the issue right there and continue the debate. But you cannot cut when I have been doing my statements. I think I find it offensive. I found it that completely wrong. And I think this way to handle the meetings, I think is wrong completely. And I couldn't finish my ideas because, yes, let me tell you one thing. I didn't learn housing in 1 year or in 1 hour in the community hall. I have almost 40 years of professional experience in that field. I studied a lot of years in that. So in 1 hour, I didn't learn anything in the community hall. So it's my background, it's my experience of what I'm talking about right here. So the only thing is, I want to start with something very simple. Raise your hand or say something. I would like to see if it's possible to hear. Tell me $25 billion is a lot of money. Who said this a lot or who said this not? Is anybody can raise their hand, said this a lot at $25 billion? Apparently nobody want to answer. But $25 billion is nothing. It's nothing. Because the deficit of affordable housing is 100,000 of affordable units. So $25,000 doesn't help at all. So to build affordable housing with $25 billion, we cannot do much. It's very limited in that direction. The former Mr. Cuomo, he every period he presented $20 billion for the budget, and nobody used it most of the time because they divide in two parts. So the problem is this new governor just increased $5 billion more, but it's still nothing if you compare with the deficit of housing that we have. The deficit that we have, we can measure with the vacancy rate in the city. Vacancy in the rate in the city is 3.6, and in the community board 8 is 2.8. When it happened that means the rent is very high. That's what it means. So the other point is everybody blame the developers. The developers, they are not the bad guys. That's my impression, with all respect. The developers propose. Who accept this is the bad guys? Respectfully, is our decision makers. Those are those people that they take the final decision to approve. If it's something is not reasonable, the decision maker, they should never approve these projects. The developers just propose, and the decision makers say yes. So the developers are not the bad guys. The developers, they present. The other point is that I would like to raise is what is low-income housing? The definition, this is the most important part, because I hear that said, oh, I want to have a bigger rooms. I want to have gold, maybe faucets. Yeah, you can have it. You can have it whatever you want. The more money you spend in affordable housing, the less affordable units we build. That's very simple. So what we need is to define what is affordable housing. When we define affordable housing, we understand what we're talking about right now. Because according with that is the cost of the housing. And when you know the cost of the housing, then you know if $25 billion is enough. Mr. Schumer came to our community board and he said, we have 40 billion for Nycha. Where are those the money? Where are the money? He came and he spent almost an hour glorifying himself that he brought 40 billion for Nycha. And Nycha is still in deficit. And this is the deficit is $40 billion. So we hear our decision makers, they come to us, they said, here is the money. But now Nycha said, we don't have the money. So I start begging that state offer money to resolve Nycha. So the money is, I don't know what is the problem. Mr. Schumer came right here and said, I have $4 billion for Nycha. And that is the deficit that Nycha claims, $40 billion. So the issue right here is we have to clarify this issue. Then when we clarify this issue, we can move forward. It's true. When I hear that they want to increase to 12 floor area ratio, that is terrible for us, because that means if they want to impose in the community board 8, we are the densest community board in the country, the densest. So if we have the density in that level, are we planning to increase more density? While other neighborhoods or other community board has less density. So we have to stand up in favor that's exactly what we need for us. We cannot increase more density in our community. However, I had to say, the multiple dwelling law do not apply in New York City. That's the only thing I'm happy. Do not apply, because there is an exception. Cities that more than 1 billion of people cannot apply the multiple dwelling law. So New York City is exempt of that, because that will be a disgrace if we go into 12. So 10 is a lot. 12 is a lot. It's too much. And we are the densest community board in the country. And we don't need no more people in our community. We need to help those people, those residents that we have in our community. And that's where we have to stand up. Help those people maintain the affordable housing. So in that direction, we have to work. We don't have vacant lots in our community. And if we have it, it will cost a lot of money. The more money it costs, the less affordable housing we build. So that is the rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. And I think on my behalf and Ed, anytime that anyone feels that they've been cut off or not able to speak in some way, that we regret that. And I do apologize for any circumstance that has ever happened. That is not anyone's intent. So if it happened, I do apologize, and I accept responsibility for being more careful about that in the future. Thank you for your comments. Peggy, you're up.
Thanks very much. And I would just like to ask, if a great idea to have the working group 6 or whatever, but there's something a little more urgent than breaking up into these groups, which is the governor, as you rightly put, is proposing a pot of money. It's irrelevant whether it's enough or not, but the governor is proposing money. We need to go after it, but we can't sit on our hands and wait. I think the focus of our committee right now is to do an analysis of what we need, put it into a resolution, pass the resolution, and go after the money. And then after that, we could break up into these various groups and all that sort of thing. But why can't we just start immediately on an analysis of A, what we consider affordable housing, and B, how much do we need? It doesn't have to be absolutely specific, but it certainly could be a ballpark figure. But if we don't go after it now, others will. And why should we sit on our hands? And that's what I'd like to say, is that can't we postpone breaking up into working groups for just a couple of months, get back to it later, but in the meantime, come up with a resolution about what we want and how much of the share of what the governor's talking about we deserve to get, if not more. Thanks.
A great idea, Peggy. Well, could we have, it's January 6th. So, I mean, I don't know what our meeting for next month is, but maybe we could have some volunteers. I mean, the budget is not going to get addressed before we meet next month, if it's next February, because that's just the nature of the beast in Albany. If there's folks who would be willing to look into this, a couple of people willing to volunteer, give us a list for a meeting in February, we'll pass something. Maybe we could get our we could get a meeting date for February earlier in the month, get it adopted by the board for the February full board meeting. I see Rita's hand. I'll stop here in a second. I think you know where I'm going. And then maybe, those are our two for this meeting. Maybe get some volunteers to do that. I don't know. Just kicking it out there, Peggy, though. But I think that's a great idea. You're right. No need to wait on this 25 mil. Let's get our mitts on that. Right. I don't disagree with you, Peggy. Rita, I'll stop. I think you're reading my mind anyway.
Peggy is absolutely right. But we can come up with a number tonight. How
Okay.
many affordable housing units have we lost just in Community Board 8? And if we take that number and we say we need to build that exact number, again, we already know how much of that pot we need, or estimate. I mean, trust me, you don't want me estimating any numbers for anybody. I was I'm a writer. I don't do any numbers, but we can estimate exactly what Peggy said, and I think Marco has the number of affordable housing that we have lost in Community 8. Again, I don't remember numbers, but I thought I heard 14,000, or someone jump in and say what the number is.
Someone said 14,000. That you're not incorrect. That's what I heard, Rita. I heard 14. I think that was Andrew. Was it Andrew? Or was it Marco? I can't remember.
Marco has the number.
Marco?
Do we
Thank
have
you.
a number?
It wasn't me. It was Andrew. He said it's 14,000 affordable. I don't know if it's in our community or it's in the city. I don't have no idea since 2007. I do have information in 12 projects that in our community is 777, and we build just only 12 affordable units. So for every affordable unit, we demolish 76 affordable units. So that's the only information that I have.
That's important. That why we need it. We need to correct the ratio of what's going on in our district. So we can ask for the money, we can estimate the money, and we have numbers. We lost 14,000 apartments of affordable apartments. We have to rebuild them. Where did those people go? Where are they living?
Well, this is
So
sort of what I was thinking in terms of like the group having an idea on that. I guess what I was thinking in terms of what Peggy was saying, I mean, that's why I was saying kick it to the working group, because we don't know. Maybe by February, they could give us a more concrete number. But I mean, if we have the programs, I guess I was thinking that if we had the items in the budget, the 25 billion, going back to the 25 billion and the affordable housing as part of that, if we had the specific programs, delineated already, but if somebody could delineate those and say, look, we would like to have, we're not going to get all 25 billion, but if we had somebody make a list that says, we would like this piece of this particular program, or we would like this set of funds from this particular idea the governor has proposed, or whatever that may be. If someone could report to us, we put it in a resolution, we pass it, the board adopts it, we could then, maybe it's a letter. Maybe we just do it as a letter from the committee. Maybe that's faster, right? Greg and I, we put that together as a letter and we say, look, the committee has agreed that we want our state elected officials, Dan and Senator Kruger and Assemblywoman Seawright, to push for these things in the governor's budget that's coming up. And we have a delineation of what that would be. I don't know. I mean, I'm just kicking that out there. I don't know if that helps, or because I feel the sense of urgency, Peggy, I think that you're talking about is if you're not specifically saying we want X, then it's kind of hard, because I think that's the next response is, okay, yeah, we know you'd like a piece of the action. It doesn't help us that you say you just want it. Can you help us
you want this piece, right? And we say we would like this piece of the pie, and we know our piece is going to get. Or am I missing? You're nodding, so I think I get it. Yes. Okay. Thank you. We're not in the same room, right? I don't know. Does that help, Rita? Is that no? I don't know. Maybe it's not having enough coffee. I don't know. Andrew, someone stop me while I'm.
We have 14,000 units. Let's say that all we need from a developer, what is one question? How much is it to develop one unit? What is the cost of developing one unit? And let's multiply it by 1,400. And that's what we want out of the pot.
Do other folks want to weigh in? Well, I appreciate the feedback here and the insight. Andrew, go ahead and jump in.
So many good things that everyone said. Rita, I think that finding that number and then multiplying it by 14,000 is a great idea. And we should probably ask a few experts just to correct for any sort of marginal error that one developer may have or may not. And then we could also kind of meet new partners in our endeavors that way as well. Ed, you stole my idea about talking to our state elected officials because they're going to be instrumental in helping us with, the state budget. And also, while the city usually has zoning control, and I say usually because it sounds like there's some changing dynamic between the state and the state controls environmental matters. So as we become cognizant of that, it's going to be very good to engage with state lawmakers. And I just want to agree with Marco about us being the densest area already. And that's why it's so important for our community group and community board, not only to develop a plan for our neighborhood, but to also interact with other community groups, because otherwise it appears potentially very NIMBY-ish. And we don't want that, because we want housing for all and we want to be part of the solution. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Andrew. Ema, you want to jump in?
I just wanted to add that if we lost 14,000 affordable apartments, we will be, within the next 5 years, a lot of these luxury high rises in our district will come out of 421A. A lot of them had 80/20 programs and 421A programs that are now they'll be coming out of. So we're going to be losing a lot more than 14,000.
Thanks for that.
Thank you. The only thing I'm going to say is, if you want to know how much it costs an affordable unit, $1 million at least, $1 million. So multiply 14,000 for $1 million. That's what I was saying. $25 billion is nothing. You need trillions of dollars to resolve affordable housing. And even that, even that you have the money, you don't have the technology to build all the deficit of affordable housing. And the mayor, the last mayor, he's proudly saying that he built 185,000 affordable units in 8 years. It is a record, it is very good, but 185,000 units in our city is nothing. It's still great demand of affordable housing. It's still the rents are too high, beyond the 30% of the income of the families. So to find out affordable housing is not very simple, especially in our neighborhood that we don't have lots. Thank you.
I see Rita's hands up. Go ahead, Rita. Hold on, get your mouse.
This right click is not for an old person. We have to start someplace. We have to start. We lost over with Mitchell Lama withdrawing from the program. we lost what was 100,000 or 200,000 affordable units. But we're talking about only about Community Board 8 and what we need to put back. We're the ones who are losing all those 5-story high rises. But I don't know where the people go and live there. Can we start at one point? At least we could prove that we have lost 14,000 affordable units and we need to build 20,000 more. So therefore, at $1 million a unit, therefore, we're asking for $2 billion, $20 billion. I don't do math.
I wasn't doing it along with you, Ryan.
I mean, I think if I could just jump in for a second to say that, again, I hope everyone's aware that, the working group strategy here was one of a desire to, sort of keep us focused on some of the different pieces of the puzzle that we have to continue to work on. And again, I think the idea of clarifying for ourselves what the cost of one unit is. Marco's put his number on the table, and that's appreciated. I think knowing that we've lost X amount of affordable housing, we need to get to that 20,000 number. What part of the state dollars is going to make its way here? And again, I think Marco makes a great point when he says, the amount of money the governor is putting forward isn't enough to do a lot of what's been suggested or any of it. So that's a complexity. So I think I am wondering if it would be beneficial to both try to work on some parallel tracks, putting forward some communication that we can have prepared for the next meeting to discuss, to say, this is the communication we want to make, and this is what leads to the resolution about what this investment needs to be. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. I think it would benefit us also to do some of what's suggested in the working groups, which is some of what's been pointed out as we unpack this, which is having conversations with our elected officials, continuing to do some of the analysis, partnering with the zoning team, thinking about how to engage developers, because I think that the landing point here would be to say, if someone turned to us and said, okay, we're going to make this real, this is possible, then what? I think we want to have an answer for that too. So again, I think we can dig into clarifying the investment that needs to be made, absolutely, in preparation for our next meeting. I think it's beneficial too that we think about some of these other pieces that have been noted during the course of this conversation that need to be taken on. And for those who have the ability or the ambition to be able to take them on, we can prioritize here. Getting that communication, getting that thing that turns into the resolution, let's prioritize that. At the same time, if we can do a parallel process and continue to dig into these other issues, again, I think it'll benefit us in the long term, because if it turns out that we get the dollars, we want to be able to do something with it. Ed, feel free to jump in.
No, I agree with you. I'm with you. So what are we going to do here? Are we going to have so what's our step here? What's our action step for?
What I'm hearing from the committee is that the desire is to clarify what one unit looks like, and then to think about that in relation to the number of units that have been lost. I'm trying to put those two things together to turn that into something that we can put in front of this committee to discuss and then vote on. That's something that presumably leads us to the next board meeting after our next committee meeting. And again, I say that because that put us in alignment for February. And I don't think that's a bad month, because this budget's not going to be finished until April. So that's a good runway for us, I would suggest.
Sure. Rita, go ahead.
Why can't we write a letter to our state officials and telling them that we need a piece of that pie and why we need it, and lay it out for them? And then while that's going on, we've already asked for this money, which Peggy so, was right on. That's going on. And then everything else is going on, including even looking for developers who don't charge as much money. You know, maybe there's a new kind of construction that's going on in the world that we could have eventually, but let's ask for the pie in a letter, and then let's continue doing what we want to do.
So do we want to, okay, so, all right. So I guess, Greg and I will be forwarding it on to Russell. I'm glad Russell's still with us. I mean, I think we're happy to sign off on it. If Rita, or you or Marco or someone want to volunteer to at least give us some of the body of what it is that we want to ask for. Like, does anybody have any thoughts in terms of what it is that we'd like to specifically ask for, other than, obviously it's restoring of these units, but is there anything in the budget per se that we could put together in a letter to our elected officials, right? This is who we're writing to, right? Our local state officials on this one, yes?
Yes.
Okay, right? Is there something, I mean, I'm happy at that point. I mean, look, it's a group effort. So if Rita, if you and Peggy or Marco or Sherry, I know you also, if she's still with us, I'm looking at my big screen here, or Ema, anybody else has any thoughts on that? I mean, I know Greg and I can then work on it, send it to Russell, right? And then, or we could come back to the committee, do it, first week of February, I don't know, and get an approval, or send it around among us. I don't know how that, if that violates any open meetings, so I don't know, but to get this cooking and going. Is that reasonable in terms of action steps, or no? Yes.
I'm gonna ask Russell to weigh in for a minute, if that's okay. Russell, do you want to jump in? Or no?
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's a fine process. I mean, I think basically, getting a sort of draft of a letter together, and I think that can be done over email. That's fine, and then coming up with something. And I think basically, we're contemplating having resolutions coming out of a later meeting that are going to have some specifics. And so I think what a letter that sort of broadly lays out what it is we'd like to see in terms of sort of broader goals, and specifically the goal of restoring the affordable units that we've lost. I think just to put ourselves sort of on record and get the elected officials aware of that, and thinking about ways that they can do that, now, I think is good. And we can sort of fill in the specifics with a resolution as we've been discussing.
Okay. So maybe that's okay. So that's what we'll do. We'll start circulating a letter around for.
That's great.
Okay. All right. So then we have volunteers. Do we have volunteers on this for, thanks, Russell. That was very helpful. Do we have volunteers like to be in the loop in terms of any kind of hands on that one? Like just to got Rita, Peggy, kind of loop you in that. Thank you. Billy. You're always good for, no? Ema? Yes, no, I know. Yeah, okay. Kim, you're so quiet. I see you there. It's nice to see you. Okay, Marco? Yes, we'll loop you in. Okay, thanks, Billy. Okay. Am I missing something? Is that okay? So we have an action item. Good. I'm doing something, getting something going. Great. I feel like I'm on stage with one of these vaudeville shows, and all of a sudden I turn around, the partner's like gone, and there's nobody there. I have nothing new to add to new business, so but I don't want to bail. And I think maybe Greg went to heat up his coffee. I don't know. Jokes, thoughts, snow's coming. I don't know. Anybody? Till Greg gets back. New business. Marco, you have your hand up.
Yes. I think what you should know is the procedure in order to get the money. It's very simple. And that's the state has been working in the past. And I think it will keep working in the future. You have to present a project to the office of the state, and then you get the money. But it has to be logical. It has to have common sense. If you don't have that one, you can keep writing any letters. You can do whatever you want, and it will be voiceless. Why? Because they want to hear tangible projects. They don't want to hear that I want to have 2 billion or 1 billion or 100 million. No, they want to see is, here is the project. support us. That's what they want to hear. They don't want to hear letters. They don't want to hear anything. Just only present the proposal. Once you present the proposal, they find us if it's reasonable. Thank you.
Thanks. Rita, you had your hand up. No?
Marco, how about if you give me some of the details that you have, and I will put it into, I will use my skills, which are writing, and then Peggy, who also is famous for writing. Peggy has a book out, so I only get 10 cents a book, so at any rate, if Marco, if that agrees with you, you have things about developers or what you need to develop. If you give it to me, I will write my section and give it to Ed. That's,
Sure.
How does that sit with you, Marco?
Yes, not only that, I do have a proposal. I do have a project that I wasn't able to present in the community board in benefit of Nycha development. It's a tangible project. It's clearly, and the budget to build 2,356 affordable units. We're talking about $1,200 million, just only 256 affordable units. So this is what it came my idea that $25 billion is nothing. So yes, I do have the project. Thank you.
Okay.
So if I'm following at this point, it's Rita, you're going to get, Marco's going to pass some information along. There's some writing to be done. There's a letter that's going to be drafted, clarifying the desire to see this, what we've lost to be restored in this budget. I'm hopeful that we'll continue to take other steps along the way so that once we get this, a letter that this committee is comfortable with, we can get it through the proper channels here. We feel good about it, and that there are action steps attached to it. And we're not just waiting for a response. We're going to hold folks accountable to make it happen. And that requires us to do, I think, some of the things that we've talked about along the way with our electeds and others to make it possible. Ema, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask if this means that the working groups are going to be delayed, or can we do this as we write this letter? I think we can do both. Form the groups as well as write the letter. I think the letter is very important, but I also think that forming the groups, is also important.
I think Rita's willingness to step up and Marco's support, and obviously the support Ed and I and others can provide to make the letter happen, means that we can do a couple things at the same time. So I'm gonna, as a follow-up to this meeting, I think Ed and I can circulate kind of what we've thought about in terms of the working groups. And if folks want to start jumping on board, let's try to do that, to take nothing away at all from the primary objective to start, which is let's get documented what we want and what's important to us. Is that fair? Peggy, go ahead.
I hope though, maybe next time at our next meeting, we could actually pass a resolution as well, because it would give a lot more strength to what we're seeing in the letter. So that would be.
I agree wholeheartedly on that. I think that's the path here. Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Definitely. I think we have the resolution. Actually, we have the letter and for the committee to look at our final product. And yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay, other thoughts, reactions? We got work to do, people. This is what 2022 is all about. We got work to do.
Great.
I want to express my thanks for this time. Do we need to call the meeting to a close? Ed, how do we do that? I don't even remember.
I think I think we're done with new business. So anybody have anything else? If not,
There we go.
we're
Thank you.
entertain any kind of motions, Billy?
Motion to adjourn?
Any seconds? I see a lot of thumbs up. Russell, waving. Okay, I think that's a second. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. I hope this was a
Smiling
good meeting
face.
for you. It was good for us. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Look forward to seeing you guys in person soon. Okay.
Night.